If you've ever had a normal Saturday turn into the worst night of your life in under 10 minutes, you already know how fast everything can fall apart. This happened in my own backyard, in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, and I still can't sit outside after dark without my hands shaking a little. I was 26 that summer, living in a small rental house I just moved into a few months earlier. It had a decent-sized backyard, nothing fancy, just grass, a wooden fence, and an old fire pit the previous tenants left behind. My buddy Cole came over that Saturday with a bag of firewood, and we figured we'd just sit out back, get a fire going, and talk about nothing in particular. It was the kind of night you don't even remember planning. It just happens. We got the fire started around 9. Cole was telling me some story about his job. I wasn't even really listening, just nodding along, watching the flames pop and crackle. Normal stuff. Around 10:30, we heard a car pull up out front. Not unusual, people park on our street all the time. It's a narrow road and cars come and go. We didn't think anything of it. A couple minutes later, we heard the gate on the side of the house creak open. Now that gate had a latch. Not a fancy one, just a simple hook lock, but it wasn't something that swung open on its own. Cole looked at me, I looked at him. Neither of us said anything. Then a man walked around the corner of the house into the backyard. He wasn't sneaking. That's the part that still messes with me. He walked in like he belonged there, hands in his jacket pockets, calm, almost casual. Mid-30s maybe, average build, wearing a gray hoodie even though it was warm out. He stopped a few feet from the fire pit and just looked at us. "Hey," he said, "you guys seen a dog around here? Little brown one, answers to Biscuit." Cole, being the friendlier one, said no, we hadn't seen any dog. The guy nodded slowly, looked around the yard like he was actually searching for something, and then his eyes landed on the fire. He said something about how nice it looked, asked if we minded if he warmed up for a second since it had gotten chilly. It hadn't gotten chilly. It was 80 degrees out. I should have said something right then. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. But you don't want to be the guy who's rude to a stranger over nothing, so I just kind of shrugged, and he walked closer and crouched down by the fire like he was one of us. For the next few minutes he talked. Rambled, really, about the dog, about how he just moved into the area, about how nice the neighborhood seemed. Cole tried to keep up a normal conversation with him, but I noticed things. Small things. His shoes didn't match someone out searching a neighborhood at night. They were nearly brand new, no scuffing, no grass stains. His hands were shaking slightly, and every so often his eyes would drift toward the back door of my house, just for a second, then snap back to us. At one point he asked if anyone else was home. I said yeah, my wife was inside, even though she wasn't, she was out of town for the week. I don't even know why I said it. Something in my gut just told me to. He nodded, went quiet for a second, and then asked if he could use the bathroom. Cole started to say sure, and I cut him off. Told the guy the bathroom was being fixed, plumbing issue, sorry man. He looked at me for a second longer than felt normal, just stared. Then he smiled, this small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes at all, and said no worries. That's when I noticed the bulge in his jacket pocket. Not huge, but enough that when he shifted his weight, the fabric pulled tight against something solid and rectangular. Could have been a phone, could have been anything, but my whole body went cold looking at it. Cole must have seen my face change because he suddenly stood up and said he needed to grab something from his car. It was a lie, obviously, we both knew it, but it gave us an excuse to move. The guy watched him walk toward the gate, and for just a second I saw something shift in his expression, something calculating, like he was doing math on whether letting one of us leave the yard was a problem. He didn't stop Cole. He just turned back to me and kept talking about that dog, Biscuit, over and over like he was trying to keep the conversation alive, keep himself in the yard, keep himself close to that back door. Cole came back a minute later, and I saw it in his eyes immediately. He'd called the police from his car. He sat back down, tried to act normal, but his leg was bouncing under him like crazy. The guy stayed almost 20 more minutes. 20 minutes of small talk about nothing. 20 minutes of him glancing at the house. 20 minutes of me trying to keep my voice from shaking every time I answered a question. It was the longest 20 minutes of my entire life. When the patrol car finally pulled up out front, its lights weren't even flashing. They must have wanted to keep it quiet. The guy heard the car door shut out on the street and went completely still. Then he stood up, said something like, "Guess I better keep looking," and walked out through that same gate, calm as anything, like he had somewhere to be. The officers stopped him at the end of the driveway. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw them pat him down, saw one officer's posture change fast, saw them cuff him right there on the sidewalk. Turns out he had a knife in that jacket pocket, the bulge I'd seen, not a phone at all. They told us later he had priors. Break-ins mostly, and one charge that involved a home where the resident was alone at the time. He'd been casing houses on our street for over a week, and my backyard fire that night gave him the perfect excuse to walk right in and get close, figure out who was home, figure out what was worth the risk. I think about it every time I have people over now, about how easy it was for him to just walk in through an unlocked gate, sit down at our fire like he was one of us, and how close Cole and I came to finding out exactly what was in that pocket the hard way. That gate has a padlock on it now, and I still check it twice before I go to bed. If you've ever heard something crack in your backyard at 2 in the morning and told yourself it was just the wind, I need you to listen to this before you ever ignore that sound again. It was late September. I just finished dinner, my wife was already asleep, and I went out back to grab the trash cans before pickup the next morning. Nothing dramatic. I'd done it 100 times. Our backyard wasn't anything special. A wooden fence, a small patio, a shed my father-in-law built years ago that we mostly used for garden tools and old paint cans. That night the shed door was open. Now I want you to understand that door had a latch. Not a lock, just a latch, the kind you flip down so the wind doesn't blow it open. I always flipped it down, every single time. It was one of those habits you don't even think about anymore, like locking your car. I stood there for a second just looking at it, and my first thought wasn't fear, it was annoyance. I figured maybe the latch had rusted, or my wife had grabbed something earlier and forgot to close it, so I walked over to shut it. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't rot, and it wasn't anything I could immediately place. It was almost sweet, like spoiled fruit mixed with something metallic underneath it. I told myself it was probably a dead animal, a raccoon or possum that had crawled in and died. It happens, I've dealt with it before. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight and stepped inside. The shed was small enough that the light reached every corner. Garden tools on the wall, a lawnmower, some paint cans stacked in the back. Nothing out of place. No animal, but the smell was stronger in here, and it was coming from somewhere I couldn't immediately see. I noticed the old wooden workbench pushed against the back wall had been moved, just slightly, enough that there was now a gap between it and the wall, maybe 8 inches wide. My father-in-law had built that bench heavy on purpose, so nothing could shift it. I shined my light into that gap. There was a duffel bag back there, black, zipped halfway, wedged down low like someone had shoved it in fast and didn't have time to close it all the way. I want to be honest with you. Every instinct in my body told me to walk away right then. Close the shed, go inside, call the police in the morning, pretend I never saw it. But curiosity is a strange thing when fear hasn't fully kicked in yet. I reached down and unzipped it the rest of the way. Inside was cash, a lot of it, bundled in rubber bands stacked tight, and underneath the cash a handgun and a set of car keys with a rental company tag still attached. That's when the fear finally caught up with me. Because I understood all at once exactly what I was looking at. Someone had hidden this here, recently, and they were absolutely coming back for it. I zipped the bag closed as fast as I could, my hands shaking so bad I could barely work the zipper. I didn't touch the cash again, didn't touch the gun. I backed out of that shed, closed the door, and did not flip the latch, because I didn't want whoever this belonged to knowing anyone had been inside. I went straight into the house and locked every door. My wife woke up when I came in, asked what was wrong, and I told her everything. We called the police that night. Not emergency, but a non-urgent line because nothing was actively happening. We just needed someone to know. An officer came out about 40 minutes later. He looked at the shed, looked at the bag, and his whole demeanor changed the second he saw what was inside. He radioed for backup immediately. Within the hour, there were 3 patrol cars outside my house, and I remember standing on my own porch at nearly 1 in the morning, watching red and blue lights bounce off my neighbor's windows, feeling like I was watching someone else's life. They took the bag as evidence. An officer explained, carefully, that this looked like something connected to an ongoing case they were already working, involving a string of robberies a few towns over. Whoever committed them had apparently been using unlocked sheds and garages in quiet neighborhoods as temporary drop points, betting that homeowners wouldn't notice or wouldn't check. They asked me not to touch anything if I ever found something like it again, and not to confront anyone if I saw someone in my yard at night. Just call them immediately. For the next 2 weeks, a patrol car sat outside our house most nights. Nobody ever came back for that bag. Whoever it belonged to must have realized it had been found and abandoned the plan entirely. The police told us later that an arrest had eventually been made, connected to the string of robberies, though they never confirmed for certain it was tied to what happened in our yard. But here's the part that still gets to me, the part I think about every single night before I go to bed. That bag wasn't hidden by someone passing through. Whoever put it there knew our yard, knew the shed had a latch and not a lock, knew it was tucked out of sight from the street and from our back windows. They picked our property on purpose, out of every yard on that block, because it was convenient for them. We put an actual lock on that shed the very next day. Motion lights too, covering every inch of the yard. But even now, years later, I can't walk out to that shed at night without my stomach tightening just a little. Because the scariest part of that whole night wasn't the bag, or the gun, or the cash. It was realizing that a complete stranger had stood exactly where I was standing, in my own backyard, deciding my property was the perfect place to hide something they didn't want found. And I never even knew he'd been there. You know that feeling when you're standing in your own backyard, and for just a second something feels wrong, but you can't explain why. I used to think that feeling was nothing, just your brain playing tricks. I don't think that anymore. This happened in my backyard on a Sunday afternoon in June, in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. A normal day, blue sky, kids riding bikes a few streets over. I just moved into the house 2 months before. It was a good deal, a little older, needed some work, but the yard was huge. Almost half an acre, fenced in on 3 sides, with a tree line at the back where the property met a strip of undeveloped land. The realtor told me that land belonged to the county, that it wasn't going anywhere, that it was basically a bonus buffer of privacy. I liked that. I liked having space. That Sunday, I was out back doing what anyone does on a lazy weekend, mowing, trimming the hedges, just puttering around. My dog, a border collie named Scout, was running around the yard the way she always did, chasing nothing, happy to be outside. Around 2 in the afternoon, I noticed Scout had stopped playing. She was standing near the back fence, completely still, staring into the tree line, not barking, not growling, just staring, ears up, body stiff like she was frozen mid-thought. I called her, she didn't move. I figured maybe a rabbit had run through, or a squirrel, something that had her locked in hunting mode. I walked over, expecting to shoo her off towards some critter in the brush. But when I got close enough to see what she was looking at, there was nothing there. Just trees. Just shadows between the trunks. I put my hand on her collar and she flinched, actually flinched like I'd startled her out of a trance. That struck me as strange because Scout never flinched at anything. She'd slept through thunderstorms, but I shrugged it off. Dogs are weird sometimes. I went back to mowing. About 20 minutes later, I noticed something in the grass near the fence line. A small hole, maybe 6 inches wide, freshly dug, right along the base of the fence post. At first I thought it was Scout. Dogs dig, that's normal, but Scout was still standing exactly where she'd been, and this hole looked deliberate. Clean edges, like it had been dug with a tool, not paws. I crouched down and looked closer. There was a short length of wire poking out of the dirt, threaded from the hole toward the fence, disappearing under the bottom rail into the tree line on the other side. I was thinking maybe some contractor left equipment behind, or the previous owners had some old irrigation line I didn't know about. I tugged the wire gently. It gave a little, then went taut, like it was connected to something on the other side of the fence. I stood up and walked along the fence line toward the gate that led into the tree strip. That land was supposed to be empty county land, unused, the realtor's words still in my head. I unlatched the gate and stepped through. The trees were thicker than I expected once you were actually inside them, and the temperature dropped a few degrees in the shade. I followed the wire with my eyes. It ran along the ground, half buried, weaving between 2 trees, before disappearing behind a thick patch of brush about 30 feet in. I walked toward it, and that's when I noticed the flattened grass. A path, not a deer trail, too straight, too consistent, like someone had walked the exact same route enough times to wear it into the ground. It ran parallel to my fence line, the whole length of my property, and kept going past it in both directions. Someone had been walking back there, a lot. I followed the wire behind the brush, and that's where I found the camera. Small, black, zip-tied to a low branch, angled directly at my back door and the section of yard where I usually sat with my coffee in the mornings. Not a trail cam, not the kind of thing you'd use for wildlife. This was aimed at my house. I stood there for a long moment just staring at it. My first thought was almost funny in hindsight. I actually thought, maybe it's the neighbors, maybe it's a prank. I picked it up to look for a brand name, a memory card slot, anything. That's when I heard it. Not footsteps, not a voice. A radio click, the unmistakable static crackle of a 2-way radio keying on, somewhere in the trees not far from where I was standing. I froze. Then a voice came through, low, garbled by distance and static, but close enough that I understood 3 words before it cut off. He found it. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I dropped the camera and ran straight back through the gate, into my own yard, and I didn't stop until I was inside my house with the door locked. Scout ran in behind me, tail down, ears flat. I called the police that afternoon. 2 officers came out, walked the tree line with me, found the camera exactly where I'd left it, found 2 more further down, spaced out along nearly a 1/4 mile of the property boundary, not just mine, but my neighbors too. Whoever set them up had been watching that whole stretch of backyards for who knows how long. They never found who did it. No prints on the cameras. No registration, no serial numbers that led anywhere. The wire, they said, was probably a battery extension, running back to a hidden power source deeper in the trees that whoever it was had already pulled before police arrived. Someone had been out there fast enough to grab their gear and vanish before a single squad car showed up. I sold that house 4 months later, not because of the money, not because of the neighborhood. I sold it because I never sat in that backyard again without checking the tree line first, because I kept thinking about those 2 words crackling through a radio in the middle of a sunny Sunday afternoon. He found it. Not someone's out there, not he's coming, just 3 words that meant I was never supposed to know. That's the end of tonight's 3 backyard horror stories. 3 different backyards, 3 different situations, but each one had the same reminder. Sometimes the place you feel safest can hide something you never saw coming. Which of these 3 stories scared you the most? Let me know in the comments, story 1, story 2, or story 3. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next collection of horror stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, if something feels wrong in your own backyard, trust your instincts.